So first, I'd like to say hello and welcome to the DLE Virtual Culture Chat on this admittedly not so beautiful August 7th. For those that are new to the program, the DLE Culture Chat is a business-oriented open discussion to explore obstacles in the workplace and engage peers in finding solutions. As always, we have people from differing backgrounds to provide unique perspectives. Culture Chat aims to address the timely trends and challenges in the workplace and facing the workforce regardless of industry. This week, with the help of two special guest panelists, we'll be discussing how as return to work dates keep sliding into 2021, companies are building meaningful relationships between new hires and their teams. As we aim to be ahead of the curve, Forbes and Harvard Business Review have both gotten our agenda for this week apparently, as they've released articles in the last 2 days talking about virtual onboarding. As I mentioned before, we're extremely lucky today to be joined by two Fortune 500 rising leaders, Jenna Parezo and Krystle Blake. Jenna has a bachelor's degree in finance and marketing from Syracuse University and is currently pursuing her MBA at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. Jenna is a DLE 2014 alumni and currently resides in Los Angeles, California, but is making her way to Denver soon. She started her career with Otis in 2014 as a service sales rep in Stamford, Connecticut, and has since assumed roles of increasing responsibility, including business development manager in Chicago, branch sales manager in Chicago, and most recently a regional sales manager for the Western region, overseeing the growth and development of customer-centric sales roles. In her free time, you can find her riding horses or hiking new trails, and sometimes even on a mountain bike. Krystle is an underachiever, only a triple graduate, first obtaining a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Union, following that up with a master's in mechanical engineering from Purdue, and just because she didn't feel like that was enough, recently finished her MBA from UMass Amherst. Currently, Krystle's a project manager at General Dynamics based out of Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Recently, she took on a special project to pilot new onboarding prototypes, which were obviously thrown into the air when the pandemic began. These two have a unique breadth of knowledge between them and have prepared an opening discussion to get us going. We'll be beginning our conversation today with both Jenna and Krystle sharing a bit more about their experience and the current onboarding challenges facing them, and then we'll transition into our normal conversation. We'll first go to Jenna. Again, Jenna, thank you so much for your time.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to most of you. I'm on the West Coast, so still morning for me, but couldn't think of a better way to start my morning than talking to this amazing group of people. And thank you, Linda, for putting this together and everyone else that's on the team. So thank you, Cooper, for the warm introduction. As Cooper mentioned, I've been with Otis for about 6 years and had various roles of responsibility. However, one constant in all those roles is that I've always either, I was onboarded 6 years ago, but I've also been in a leadership role with various types of onboarding, whether it's interns or a new trainee class, or in my current role where I'm involved in a rapid expansion of a group of sales reps that are servicing our smaller customer base that may not have been paid attention to as much so as our larger revenue clients. So since I started the role in September, I've onboarded about 8 new hires. And what's unique about my role is that I don't sit in the same office as any of those people. They are anywhere in the western half of the United States, and they are typically sitting in a branch office. So they report to me. I have oversight of the whole onboarding process. However, I'm also working day to day with the local managers and the local team to make sure that my new hire has the support that they need from the local team. So 3 parties in the mix here, and it makes for a great learning environment, but also a challenging one because you have to make sure everyone's on the same page and everyone's following a specific curriculum to make sure that that person is learning everything that we need them to learn in their first 90 days, okay? And a couple things that I have found immensely helpful for that process is the use of one-on-one daily check-ins. It's something that I do now weekly with people who once I'm through the onboarding process, but in the initial onboarding, the first 90 days, I have daily 10 to 15 minute calls on the calendar if they need to be canceled or rescheduled, we have the autonomy to do that. But the fact that they're on the calendar makes the new hire feel like they're really able to connect with me whenever they might need something. And they know, oh, if I have something from the end of today that I need to talk to Jenna about tomorrow, they know they have something on the calendar. So I can't stress enough the importance of those check-ins. It also helps a lot with, building rapport with the people, because even if you don't have a tangible task that they need help on or want to talk about, let's chat about how your week's going or what you're doing on the weekend. And I've found it very, very beneficial to building relationships with people that are thousands of miles away from me. In addition, the buddy system, I know it's something that a couple people on the call are familiar with. Having the new hires set up with a mentor or a buddy that they can go to that might not necessarily be their direct manager is something that's very comforting for them. And I've gotten really positive feedback on that. And then thirdly, just open dialogue with the group, being able to interact with peer-to-peer and being able to know that they have a network of people that are in exactly the same role as them to go to has been great positive reinforcement as well. And one question I had for the group that I was curious about, I touched on the fact that I hired 8 new people in less than a year period. And something unique about that is I'm not hiring groups of people all at once. I'm hiring one person at a time. So have you guys in your roles experienced, not necessarily hiring a training class and taking them through one curriculum altogether, but individuals? And how do you create consistency for all of those individuals and not have it be burdensome on one particular person to make sure that that person's onboarding is successful?
Jenna, thank you so much for that intro. Before we get to the answer to your question, you actually received one from Evan. He's asking, How long into a new hire's career do you continue the daily check-ins before you move to a weekly check-in?
Yep, great question. So I typically am doing the daily check-ins during the initial 90-day onboarding period. Once we get past those 90 days, I always offer, if they want to keep them or if they feel like maybe they need more than once a week, I always bring that up as an option. And some people will take me up on it, or they also know that I'm just always available if they want to text me or call me. So I just really try to keep the line of communication open after those 90 days.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Krystle, I know you also have had experience in this, and as our second guest panelist, I'd love for you to check in on Jenna's answer and see how you've been dealing with this, and then explain a little bit more of your own situation.
So Jenna's question first about whether we have small groups. So I guess at General Dynamics, so reminder, I work at General Dynamics, we do tend to get kind of large cohorts of people that come in around the summertime. So right now is when we tend to get most of our new hires coming right out of college, and we do get larger groups. When we tend to get smaller kind of 1s, 2s in a week happens off of those summer months in other times. But we always do, every Monday, we have an onboarding with HR that happens for about a half day. So regardless of whether that's one person starting on a Monday or 20 people starting on a Monday, they'll always have that first day, half day training with HR. But really, if you don't mind, I'll kind of go into it. What I've had the opportunity to do is a little bit different. In the past 9 or 10 months, we have developed something coming really out of the need for a more robust onboarding process. So we recognized that half day with HR wasn't really connecting employees in all the ways that we wanted it to. And it kind of left all of the rest of the onboarding education portion to that employee's manager or their team that they're going into. And that created a lot of inconsistencies. Not every manager onboards their employees the exact same way. So we got a small group of us. I'm actually fortunate to have some more of us on this call. So Minerva and Evan and Linda were all part of this group with me that conceived something called an onboarding boot camp, which is a 1-week program that focuses on three tenets: connection to mission, connection to culture, and connection to community. So we found that by focusing in each of those areas and really building out what the curriculum would be to focus on each of those connection points, we could create a little bit more of a consistent onboarding process for our new hires. And we could also create a cohort. So a sense of connection to this group that is going through this onboarding process together, giving them immediate connection to other people that they can reach out to who may not work on their specific team. So really a lot of benefits to this type of process. And we got some leadership buy-in. We were getting really excited. We started to build this out and come up with, what all the components are. And then COVID hit in March, and we kind of had to meet as a group and decide, how do we do this? Do we wait? Which was our initial reaction was maybe we wait until this dies down. And then it took a couple weeks for us to realize that's probably not happening anytime soon, and we can't afford to wait. This isn't something that we can wait for. We're still hiring people. That isn't changing. So we had to really change our strategy a little bit and figure out how we could convert things like tours in our facility to presentations, things like in-person training, or even a bus tour throughout the Berkshires that we had originally thought would be a really great way to connect them to our community. We can no longer do that. So how do we turn that into something that would be engaging via a screen? So we spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that. We collected a group of 13 employees, and we actually put them through our very first pilot last week. So it included presentations that were kind of common training, things that we want all employees to learn about, communications and Agile and some other things that really all employees should know. It included program overviews for all the different pieces of work that General Dynamics does in Pittsfield. We want them to have a broad understanding of what we support, how we support our customers, and included a lot of team building and exercises to introduce them to community service, introduce them to what are some great restaurants and some great cultural institutions in the Berkshires. How do we get them involved and connected to the rest of the community? So I think it went really well. We got some feedback. We're still digesting all of that feedback and really prioritizing how do we continue to make this great as we progress. Our model would be right now that we would collect all of the new hires from the previous month, and sometime in month 2 we would take them through this onboarding week. So they'd still get their half day with HR, they'd go to their team, and then sometime in their second month they would all get together as a cohort and learn all of these things. So we are still adapting. We're still figuring out how to make this better, but we're getting some really good initial feedback and found that even over Zoom for an entire week, we can still start to build some of those connections.
Well, Krystle, I think you hit it right on the head that the hardest thing to do right now, especially as a new hire, is to develop a sense of community in the workplace. So I know you've mentioned that you've been getting feedback, but have you been working actively with any of the new hires to promote, say, doing outside activities together, or saying, hey, we know that you know almost no one here because you just moved here, here's how we can connect you?
Yeah, we've been doing some of that on an individual basis. When some of them reached out and said, hey, I play hockey, I connected them with people who I know play hockey in the area, just kind of on a one-by-one basis. But also some of them are starting to connect. Some of them who went through that process last week together are starting to connect with each other separately, which is what we want. We want them to reach out to each other and say, hey, do you want to go kayaking? This is something we can do at a distance. It's not super dangerous to go out and kayak together. So just finding connections and feeling like they can just reach out to each other. That's what we want. We want people to feel connected.
Absolutely, because to be a good workplace, you need to feel connected to your employees and the people around you. So at this point, I'd like to open the conversation up to everyone else and run this like we've ran many in other culture chat. And we actually had a question: if we have any hiring managers in the chat, other than meetings, how are you promoting interactions between current and new hires? So would anyone be able to speak on that?
This is Austin. I don't have my video on. I'm in Rhode Island. Don't have my computer, but I was a part of that onboarding training week at the GDMS that was run by Krystle and Evan, who I think is also on the call. And I'll tell you, even though I've been working there already for 7 months, I thought it was an absolutely fabulous experience, and I learned so many things that I still did not know about the company for as long. And I think that even though it was virtual, we were still able to make those connections that you were talking about. For example, I made connection with 2 people who were going to go up and go hiking up at Killington, and I was able to reach out to them and ended up not going because it was raining, but still now I have them as a connection to go and do activities such as go hiking and stuff. And I think that aside from learning work in the business and all that, you making that connection and having that group that we can now go to is so huge. And we made a LinkedIn group, so everybody got added on LinkedIn to each other. We made a LinkedIn group, the 2020 July onboarding guinea pigs, and now we can all stay connected through LinkedIn in that way. And we actually had a challenge given to us by Linda that is due August 12th. That is how we are going to be monitoring that. I think I'm going to go ahead and take the reins and be in charge of that to make sure that actually gets done. And so it was just really, really great, and to now have connection with people, especially because for people who move here from other states and stuff, there were people in there from Ohio, from North Carolina, and they know nobody and have no connections. So having that ability to do that was really, really awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, all of that sounds fantastic. I'd love to hear more about this August 12th challenge that Linda gave you. But Donna, it looked like you wanted to contribute. And John, I'd love to come to you after to hear more about Slack and how technology is helping with this.
Thanks. So at Greylock, we've mostly hired people that are going to be working in the branches, so they're not sitting, they are meeting other people that they're going to work with day in and day out. But the ones, we had a program in place similar to Jenna's at Otis, where you're matched with a peer, buddy or mentor. So we're continuing to do that process and give them somebody. We like to say it's somebody you can go to ask those questions where you're kind of afraid to go to your manager because you don't want to look not dumb, dumb for lack of a better word, right? So we are continuing that program as we go virtually and actually starting it sooner for people that aren't going to be working in a branch and they're sitting at home so that they'll have that connection that much sooner.
Thank you, Donna. And before we move to John, could you just please explain where you work and what you do?
I'm so sorry. I work at Greylock Federal Credit Union, and I'm the Director of Employee Training and Development. We have a huge onboarding program. It's a 3-month process. We have some quarterly classes that they take so that there's larger groups that come together because we just don't have, Nikki could tell us, we have maybe 12 new hires a year. So to kind of keep some larger groups together, we do some quarterly things, but there's a whole like 23 hours in their first 3 weeks of presentations.
That's fantastic. John, I know you mentioned that Slack is great for cohorts and groups.
Yes. So I don't use Slack currently at Raymond James, but we do use something else, and I'll get to that. But Slack was great when I worked at Datadog as a sales development representative because our whole class, which was I think maybe 10 of us, would all communicate in this Slack, and it was like I forget her name, the lady who just spoke at the credit union, but we would ask the questions, to each other about certain material, about what Datadog did and what it does, and because some of the questions, quite honestly, you'd feel dumb asking again, or you wouldn't feel comfortable. So it was great for that communicating. You could also, talk with people who don't have their cell phone, their Instagram, whatever. So it was great to talk to them and get some plans going. But in terms of training each individual person, actually at Raymond James we have this. Oh, so my title. So I'm a dual title. I am currently almost licensed as a financial advisor. I have one last test at Raymond James. I also created Blendy, which is a portable blender. So I kind of do both. And going back to Raymond James, so we have Centrical, and Centrical is interesting because it's individual, but it's also a team event too. So there'll be objectives and missions in Centrical, which I have to complete as a part of my training, quote unquote, and it gives me a point system. So they have like little cars, and it's like racing around a track, but basically it shows, you know, you versus everybody else in the cohort, and then you're split up into different teams of that cohort. So it's really interesting. And we've had 2 virtual visits, and in those virtual visits, they split us off into teams, and then we all work together. So it's interesting to have this virtual environment.
Absolutely. So John, you mentioned you were an entrepreneur, and I know it's not directly onboarding, but right now, is dealing with clients any different in terms of gathering new business, keeping expanding, all of that?
No, so it's interesting because all my business, I can go into retail stores easily, but to even get into a retail store, let's say to sell Blendy, I would have to basically email them, or I would want to email them. It's rare that I ever show up unannounced, you know what I mean? And a lot of my retail stores now are from either Facebook or doing live sessions, stuff like that. And they can see the product for the most part. But yeah, it's not that, it hasn't changed much.
Absolutely. And Evan, thank you for dropping the Blendy link. I'd recommend that
Yeah.
everyone check it out, not to push a product, but since it's
Yeah.
not mine, I'm allowed to.
So, oh, I can't push it, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're doing
I can,
pre-sales, but whatever.
and I
Okay.
recommend it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you.
So for anyone who's a newer hire, I'd love to hear about your process becoming onboarded into a new environment. I know I've only been working at General Dynamics for a year, and obviously a year ago it was completely different, and I was unfortunately not lucky enough to be in part of this pilot program we had at General Dynamics. But I was paired up with a buddy, and the buddy was a good resource, and it drew me into the community. So if we have any newer hires, I'd love to hear what you've been going through. I know we have newer hires, so I'm just going to pick on someone if no one calls out. All right, Ryan, are you here? You were the first name I saw, and it's trial by fire. If you're trying to speak, you are muted. If not, I can also move on. Oh, there we go.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan Bichkevich. I actually started at General Dynamics about a year ago, so I'm not incredibly new. But I did kind of go through Cooper like.
Ryan, you seem to just drop off there. No problem. We can keep moving along and come back. Sadeep, I'd love to hear from you. As someone who's come on to the DLE workforce in the midst of a pandemic and not working at a physical location, how has this been different being completely virtual?
I think for me, the main thing is the constant communication. So Linda and I and Marcus were always emailing and, talking over the phone. So the process has been pretty smooth. As an intern, I'm not working as much as like a full-time person, but so far I think the key has just been to talk a lot, email, text, and to make sure like everything is clear. So it's been pretty smooth so far.
That's great. That's what I love to hear. I understand that you bleed orange, as all Syracuse people do. In coming back to school, that is also in a ways an onboarding process. Have your professors been telling you anything about how they're going to deal with onboarding possible virtual classes and bringing people into that environment?
Yeah, so far only one of my classes is fully online, but so far the other 4 are all hybrid model. So if we have class Tuesday and Thursday, then half the class will come in Tuesday, another half will be virtual, and they'll switch the next day. So yeah, pretty much they're trying to make sure everyone can access it online with like you know, half the people coming in. So that's the adjustment they're making.
Do you think that what Krystle was talking about in terms of cohorts, do you think there's something lost in moving to a hybrid model where you're transitioning who's in class and who's out of class? Because I know the biggest problem I've heard from every new employee I've talked to is that it's just impossible to become part of the community right now. When you're stuck in your house, when you don't know of any groups that are doing things in an organized manner outside.
Yeah, I think there is something lost, especially for our capstone project, like our senior year final project. We're gonna have to meet in our teams virtually. So that's definitely one thing that's gonna not be as great. I think it is more tough for freshmen. Like me and Slater, we're seniors, so we kind of already know people, we already have our friends. So I think it's more of an issue for freshmen, especially when you go into class, instead of 40 people, there's 20, and now they're sitting, 6 feet away from each other, so it's not like they're gonna be talking. So I think that's definitely gonna be an issue for younger kids.
Absolutely. And Slater, do you feel the same?
Yeah, I definitely feel the same. I think it's going to be difficult. I think it definitely will be more difficult for freshmen, but I think it will be difficult for anyone, like people in any grade, just because, like, even just asking questions to a teacher after class, it's just a different dynamic trying to figure out things and going back and forth over email with a professor, with a TA or something. I think it's probably going to feel a lot more like you're on your own with online classes, which like just makes it exponentially more difficult. And I think it's you made an interesting point about like comparing going back to class as like an onboarding thing. I think unfortunately teachers aren't really used to like teaching classes online, so the like onboarding process is going to be a little rocky. And I think I'm not sure exactly like what that will result in, but I do think it's going to be more difficult than usual to kind of like get accustomed to the community of the classroom and feel comfortable maybe like participating or asking questions or something like that.
Absolutely. So you just mentioned that teachers are not prepared to teach online. I find the same actually happens with managers, where I've spoken to my manager and she said that none of her training was how to onboard people online. And I was wondering if Evan or Krystle or Jenna or Donna could speak on if you guys have had any specific training to how to onboard people virtually.
I'll take it. The short answer is no. When COVID hit, it was quite literally a scramble. It's kind of similar to so Krystle was talking about how she put together like the curriculum, right? We had a version, I don't know, 3 of a curriculum, still a work in progress. However, we had something to go, we had a skeleton to go by. So it was like, quick, let's figure out how to take the skeleton that we're used to having the person in the branch, and we're used to relying on people in person, going out in the field, looking at elevators. It's so much easier to learn about an elevator when you're looking at it, standing in front of it. And how do you translate that to virtual? And it's hard. And I don't think it's not where it needs to be yet. But it's taken a lot of time and a toll on the people who have the knowledge to enlighten their knowledge upon the new hire. So whether it be myself or someone locally or an engineer, someone who can really explain the product and explain what we want these new hires to know. And you're asking people to do it who also have full-time roles. So it's not one person that's dedicated to that. So I think we worked well with what we had, but I think we were not prepared necessarily for a sales role to do that virtually.
Jenna, we were dealing with something kind of similar, just talking about it, that some of the people who presented at our onboarding pilot week we know they're really, really engaging presenters in person, but some of it doesn't always come across on the screen. And that's not to say that they're poor presenters via screen either, but there's something different about presenting content through a computer screen than being in a room. And I think we really need to figure out ways of giving people, you know, training or even just tips and tricks, something that they can learn how to do that a little bit better, because it's a barrier to making this even more engaging.
And Krystle, to echo that, I would say, you know, we've learned, I guess the biggest takeaway is there's so much knowledge, that tribal knowledge that people have from being in the workplace that's not documented. And like, one thing I want to come up with is a sales pitch toolkit, because there's things I know how to present a product to a customer that no one knows unless I tell them or someone tells them. So it goes back to the whole process part of it and the documentation, and we're realizing that that's really lacking.
And Minerva, if you'd like to speak on what you just put into the chat box, I found it very interesting that you're talking about computer-based training and how it took some time to get instructors led back up and running. I believe you're muted.
Thank you. I am in charge of training for the systems organization, and I cross to help other areas like hardware and software and even some of our specialties. But every new hire that comes in has a mix of training. Some of it is computer-based training, and that went seamlessly. They got signed up for those courses and they took them. But a lot of the classes they take are instructor-led. And when COVID hit, we had all these classes that were occurring in conference rooms where we were pulling people in, and they just stopped. And we had a few brave instructors said, I'm going to try this. And then we gathered notes from about 4 or 5 instructors and put together some guidelines of how to present a course online. We've taken courses that were 3 solid days and broken them out to cover longer periods. We've taken ones that were, you know, an 8-hour or 9-hour course solid and broken into multiple days, giving people breaks, still giving homework and still using breakout rooms to get people working in groups on specific learning. It's been a challenge, but we did get most of the training, and some of the training took even longer. Our communications training that we did with the onboarding took us quite a bit to take it from our in-classroom 3-day training coordination, you know, having people up and practicing presentations with managers acting as customers in front of behind them, to a you know, basically a 2 4-hour half-day, you know, 2 half days of training to see, you know, what can we teach them on communications virtually, because now they're also presenting to the customer virtually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is another aspect.
Minerva, for those unfamiliar with the GDMS branches, I know you mentioned that you're part of the systems organization, but could you quickly tell us where you work and your title?
I am working in Pittsfield at General Dynamics Mission Systems, and I am a systems engineer who has an additional role of doing training coordination for all of one of the department's employees. So I also am a product lead.
Yeah, and just to give anecdotal feedback, my new hire has been very impressed with the online trainings and has been liking them.
Oh,
so
good.
hopefully that feedback can go somewhere.
Yeah, we get feedback a lot.
Yeah. For other people dealing with in-person situations now moving online, have those relationships changed? I know that all of my meetings have been moved online. I know that meetings that would take 30 minutes in person now take a week and a half to plan and then 3 hours on the day. So has anyone been dealing with challenges, not necessarily only in onboarding, but with newer people who need things explained to them, where you have to set up a formal time and talk it out instead of saying, hey, come on over, I'll show you on my computer?
So I help a lot of the new hires at our organization set up their technology, like their work laptop and their work cell phone, and getting all the pieces coordinated for that. And I can tell you that trying to figure out how to help people virtually troubleshoot setting up a new laptop, setting up a new iPhone, who are family services people and not technology people, is very difficult to do virtually. So I have to have a phone call with them and try and visualize in my head what their screen looks like in order to, walk them through the steps on setting up their email account, or walk them through the steps on changing the setting on their Microsoft account. And it takes a lot more time and a lot more patience, because usually they're sitting in front of me and I can just click everything on the screen for them. But I also found that people are more inclined to try and figure things out themselves because it takes more time. So it almost forces them to, teach themselves how to do it. And then they remember it rather than asking me 3, 4, 5 times, because I just do it for them. So, there's good and bad to it in that sense.
And Kaylee, could you quick say who you are, where you work, and what you do?
Oh yeah, I am the office manager at 18 Degrees, which is a family services nonprofit.
Thank you much. Evan, I just saw you say that I didn't even know this number. We've had 40 to 50 people hired post-COVID, which is incredible to me. Have we found, I don't have any of the stats for this, and you might, have we found that people who are hired in, let's say, January, just at the beginning of all of this, have been able to be spun up in the same situations that, say, people who were hired the August before when none of this was going on, and their 6-month progress is similar to the 6-month progress that we had before?
That's a very good question, Cooper. I don't really know how to measure that, directly today. I think the managers are saying that, who these people actually work for are saying that this is, going okay, all things considered, right? We're definitely seeing that our teams are performing okay, all things considered. We're certainly hitting our deliveries, we're hitting our sales numbers and our earnings numbers. So that's all good. But it is an enormous backlog. We've got a lot of, we're a little bit fortunate. We'd been working on this onboarding program for so long, and then it was here when COVID hit, and we brought 13 people through it, and we've got quite a backlog. So we were just meeting earlier this morning and saying we might not be able to wait very long, to kind of incorporate our lessons learned. I think we're going to have to go. We've got another 10 people or something like that already ready to start in August. So the backlog's just going to continue to build, and we got to continue to build connections with those people.
Absolutely. Linda, if I could ask you to speak on what you just put in the chat. You're saying that the current single day Monday that we have for new employees is not enough. Have we been looking at any possible solutions? I know it's all still up in the air right now, but have there been any strides in trying to either encourage social distancing in person for new hires or anything like that? And just to let you know, I believe you're muted.
Harrison. I work in HR at General Dynamics, so responsible for that initial Monday morning onboarding for all new employees. And to Evan's point, we've probably been bringing in on average, 4 to 5 new hires each Monday. It has started to slow a little bit. We're about 2 to 3 each Monday. But as Krystle said, the morning is, it's about 4 hours that they spend. With HR, we have a designated presentation going through, benefits, critical information that they need to initially sign on, how to, do timekeeping, core courses that they will have to take, the computer-based training. But we're finding once they're released, to Krystle's point, each manager then takes on a different onboarding experience for the new hire. So right now, and it's funny that you should ask our HR team, the workforce development team, and we actually have a meeting scheduled Monday. We're really looking at this extension of the onboarding process. What can we be doing that could enhance and further develop those connections like Austin talked about, and what we saw, I was asked to be part of the onboarding boot camp, which thank you guys. That was good. We need to actually have a seamless handoff from HR to the engineering organization, and then really look at the boot camp itself. Are there elements of that boot camp that can be for all employees? Should we be doing more for all employees? So the short answer is we know we have some work to do. We'll be looking at how can we enhance it. I really do think at this point, we as employees of General Dynamics are being encouraged to get webcams. It's a simple step to make employees feel connected. Some folks don't want to turn their cameras on, but it's really critical once you see each other. It really does enhance that connection. So it's a simple step, but something that should be done by all. So, the longer this goes on, I think small steps will be taken. So maybe I can report back after our initial meeting across other locations with the HR team on Monday of, what we're talking about. But I certainly will be bringing a lot of what we did in the boot camp and, offer up and let folks know what seems to be working. So anyway, we have a lot of work to do. That's what I meant by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the hardest part of all of this is every plan that we had going was thrown out of the window when all of this happened. No one could have planned for this, and no one was planning for this. I think part of what's really lucky about the area that so many of us live in out in the Berkshires is that we have so much outside to do and have opportunities to meet each other in socially distant available spaces. Maple, I'd love to hear from you, who's out in a completely different area on a different coast.
We have not hired anybody since the pandemic, but our management was very nervous when we get into this COVID situation and everybody worked from home, but it then turned out to be pretty effective. They did some internal evaluation and determined this is actually much more productive working from home than expected, and so they are actually offering the whole team the optionality. I mean, like every other tech company is doing that. It's likely that we're probably going to work from home until the end of the year. At least have the optionality to work from home wherever we want. So we have, for us it's a very small team dynamic. We only have 15 people globally. So we have 10 in the US and 5 in London. So it's actually we work internationally a lot. So we actually used to working remotely with the UK team. So it's not like new to us that we have to do this, but the senior management still, just because of Zoom, I was just on the phone with one partner who's in Chicago, and we were going through some presentation materials. Actually, we were able to just share the screen and just mark up everything in one session instead of having markup going back and forth. And or just joke around. This one thing coming out of the pandemic, so everybody worked so efficiently and just tried to mimic the turnaround on the materials. And so that's just my experience so far.
Absolutely. And Maple, can I ask you to introduce yourself? Can you tell us where you work and what you do?
Yes. My name is Maple Chen, and I work at a core group. It's a real estate private equity advisory and investor shop. And I'm based in San Francisco, California, and my company has office in Chicago, London, and San Francisco.
So Maple, you touched on something that I know a lot of people have been talking about recently, In the transition to completely virtual workspaces, I know Krystle and I were talking about this yesterday about how a lot of companies have opportunities to now let employees work wherever they want to work. And unless there's a physical need for you to be in plant, this opens up the opportunity for people to say, work in Pittsfield while living in San Francisco. Do you think this drastically changes the onboarding experience if we say, hey, we're now a global market and can hire from anywhere?
Sure. But yes, I think we touched base on those point before that having the opportunity to work remotely that could bring in a threat to our job market, because when you have international employer base that's cost significantly lower compared to a U.S. employee, that could create a lot of, I mean, yes, I should be worried as a U.S. Employee. I am constantly, I am worried that having this opportunity to hire wherever you want and is creating a threat to us who are really overpaid. But I don't think it's gonna be impact in the short term, because just cultural difference, language difference, and that, and also there's a lot of limitation around the remote working, and in general, U.S. culture really value the face-to-face opportunity. So I assume as soon as everything opens up, we still want to go back to meet everybody. And also for my business, real estate in general, even though we create different virtual property tours to kind of facilitate different needs from investors, people still like to see be on site and tour the asset and actually meet the owner and operator. So I do believe this kind of face-to-face interaction will continue as soon as people feel comfortable too.
Absolutely. And Jenna, if I could ask you to comment on this, working in technical sales, obviously human interaction is such a large component of that. With being able to hypothetically hire anywhere, do you think that changes?
Yeah, so I love talking about this subject because it's something that comes up at work all the time. You know, this is the roles that I'm overseeing, the department I oversee is specifically challenging that right now, right? We're 165 years old. We've always had salespeople in the branch being able to meet with customers, and now we're completely shifting to, I have 2 people that support the Seattle office, and one lives in Reno and one lives in Montana. And they're out from outside of the industry. I onboarded them within the last 6 months, and I've done all of their onboarding and technical training remotely. They haven't even been able to go into the field. And they've been doing a great job because the customer, frankly, it doesn't matter where they are, as long as the customer feels like they're getting serviced. They have someone to answer their phone calls and address their concerns. And it's actually made us reevaluate our sales force as a company and say, do we need to have as many branch offices, or can we support most of our customer base by having these remote sales reps? And it's so far, it's actually working very well. Our customer satisfaction scores are up. It just takes a lot more effort on the internal communication side of things, not being able to go up to someone's desk and ask a question and things like that.
Absolutely. And Donna, you brought an absolutely wonderful point up that I'd love if you could expand on.
So I'm listening to hear how we might consider, if we're going to keep jobs for our organization able to work remotely, how much do you spend in onboarding on all those things that we talk about, culture? How much does that matter? Obviously, we want them to treat our customers that they interact with or their coworkers that they interact with a certain way. But so much of our onboarding is about culture, and I wonder, is that as needed if somebody, we have an IT person that sits in Lee, Mass, rarely comes to town, and I have to pull him kicking and screaming into every one of our customer service trainings that we do annually. Yet does it matter? He only interacts with 5 other people in IT. And he's a great employee.
Well, and I think that's a huge point of where do you balance the if they're a good employee versus they should be involved in the culture versus maybe you don't need to tie your identity to your job or you should take pride in your job. So much of this is subjective. And I think I'm seeing a lot in a younger population that are not necessarily so entranced or involved in their jobs as a form of identity or a form of something they feel truly passionate about, but rather as a method of providing them the financial security to pursue other passions outside of work. And if that's true, then depending on where they live and depending on where their hobbies are, working virtually could be a huge benefit. If they love mountain biking, they can go live in Golden, Colorado and still make a really good salary working for General Dynamics Mission Systems in Pittsfield because that's the work they want to do and that's who hired them. If all they want to do is work in finance, but they hate the city, they still have that option available to them. While there are obvious positives, there are obvious negatives, such as not meeting your coworkers face to face, not having a work culture. But I'm interested in if there's a balance and if we might move to a hybrid model, similar as what Slater and Sudeep were saying about their college courses, where we say if you want to live in the office and come in when you can do that. Or if you want to live in Washington and work in New York, you're also willing to do that. Krystle, could you expand on that point?
I think, Donna's question is a good one, and how much time do you spend, working on those things? But I think even if someone's virtual, that everybody helps create that culture. And I think exactly what you said, and it's a quote that Evan says a lot about a codified culture. If you don't create that and instill that in your employees, it's going to create itself, and you will have a lot less control as to how that culture looks if you don't have that kind of ingrained and you don't teach that to your employees. And I think it's still important, just as important in the virtual world, even if employees are staying virtual, that we keep that culture as a big part of their onboarding. And that's my thought.
Krystle, I think someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Minerva, about cameras. I think that the use of cameras, we call it, like, I don't know if it's a COVID curse or what, but COVID hit and all of a sudden all of our WebEx video calls became video chats and not just everyone having their camera off. And it is huge for engagement, for feeling like you have a connection beyond the voice behind the phone. So I think once we do shift to mostly virtual or whatever the norm might be, the interaction via video is going to be huge, especially because that's what's going to create the culture virtually. I think it'll be a lot more challenging to create culture virtually if you don't have at least a sight of face to face.
And I think we saw it too last week when we were doing our onboarding bootcamp. We had one section that we weren't able to present over Zoom. We presented it over Skype instead, and we could feel the difference. I'm sure if Austin and Ryan are still on, I'm sure they could feel it too. You couldn't see people anymore, and it was almost, after having been on Zoom for a couple of days before kind of getting to this point, it's almost like, is anybody there? Because they were on the phone, but you could no longer see them. So that the camera made such a big difference.
Marcus, could you expand on your point? Or Maple, go ahead, and then Marcus.
Yeah, I have a question on the creating company culture through virtual world. Just my experience is it's much harder to show personality, and also for me, I'm much unwilling to show my personality on a virtual world. My assumption for my company current evaluation that the people are more effective because I just think virtual meetings are much more focused on work rather than when you have face-to-face interaction and you try to chit-chat more, and it's this kind of work-only kind of this dynamic creating effectiveness, but also you lose the sense of cultural within like you're less likely, people are less interested to learn about other people's, talk about other stuff. So my point is just how do you make that virtual cultural to be much more effective, or kind of create this kind of deliver this cultural company cultural environment.
Absolutely. And Minerva, you just pointed out that during comms training, you learned that over 80% of communication is nonverbal. However, I think Marcus just brought up a great point that may be generational. So Marcus, I'd love you to open up a bit more on that.
Well, I had a question first for all the hiring managers and individuals that focus on training at their firms. Have you noticed a difference in an employee's experience in virtual onboarding based on their generation?
I can talk to this a little bit, or Evan, you want to go for it? I didn't specifically onboard someone from the get-go that might have been impacted by that, but I did have, I had 10 existing people that I started working with when I took this role, and they were not used to being managed by someone virtually. So the challenge there was, I had to give myself and them extra time to figure out the technology side of things and teach them how to use WebEx and how to share their screen. But now they're in a flow. But there definitely was a learning curve in that regard.
So absolutely, Marcus, I'll give you a second to think about your response to that as I make a quick spiel. It is getting near 1 p.m. If you need to drop off, I'd like to thank you for coming, and we completely understand. As always, I will be on as long as the conversation goes. I'm free until 5:30 today, so if we want to go for another 4.5 hours, I'm here for it.
Did you want me to talk about the technology piece that Marcus brought up?
That'd be fantastic.
Okay. So Marcus asked the question about different generations being onboarded and how, if there's, I don't remember how exactly he phrased it, but how that changes their experience of a virtual world. And I hire people of all different backgrounds, all different ages. And I also, in addition to the people I onboarded in that category, I also inherited about 11 employees, and about, I would say, a third of them were of earlier generations that may not be as technologically savvy. And they're now, I get the biggest smile on my face when I call them and we have our meeting and they're like, here, let me share my screen. Let me tell you what I'm doing. And now it's a habit. And so they completely overcame that technological learning curve. And it took time, patience in the beginning with, okay, here's where you need to go on your screen to share this. But now they're in the routine and they're getting used to it. I don't know that they love it, but they're capable. And I think giving them the confidence to realize that, they can learn these new things and they can be more technologically savvy. I think it's a confidence boost for them as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's a huge learning curve that almost everyone has had to deal with. My question to follow up on that is, do you like it? Do you think it'll continue, and do you want it to continue?
I do like it. And it's interesting. I think about the different roles I had because I think I don't have a choice but to like it in the role that I took this role knowing that I'd be managing a team that I don't sit in or next to anyone. Especially, and now, so I was almost, I had people calling me when COVID hit saying, oh, you do this already. What do we do? And the material is the same. It's just, how do you engage people? And I think that my role is not changing whether COVID goes away in 6 months or 3 years. I'm still going to be doing the same thing. And I do like it. I think someone mentioned the productivity aspect earlier. I noticed that a lot. I think now more than ever, yes, you're losing a little bit of the personal touch, but you like, my meetings are so efficient. I'm like, you got 30 minutes, and if we need another call, we'll set up another call. But people are forced to be prepared. Their metrics are telling the story of their success, so it's a lot less likely to have someone, I guess, not falsify success, but what I'm trying to get at is you are not, it's obvious whether people are performing or whether they're, you know, have what they need to succeed in this environment, because it's almost a little bit sink or swim. And I'm not saying, you know, that's the best environment for everyone, but it's kind of put headlights on people and been like, wow, you know, that now data is so important. And I stress that every day. You know, you might be telling me about all the great things you're doing, but now people are looking at the numbers. And if the numbers don't tell that story, that matters more in a virtual environment. Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but.
No, but I think you hit on a wonderful point that so much of the non-quantifiable benefits of employees are now hidden behind a screen. To use the Rudy metaphor, you know, Rudy was never the star athlete, but he had the drive to make everyone else the star athletes. And I feel like that's something that's really lost right now, is the things you can't quantify. And I know, Kaylee, you've brought that up a ton, that people should not be solely defined by numbers. And I was wondering if you could talk about how, if at your company that has continued, or if it's, you know, have you finished this by X date and that's all people care about?
Yeah, so I think here, and probably with a lot of nonprofits, we're just recently, like, my office had just started creating and I'm sorry, I'm covering the front desk, so go to someone else.
Hey,
No
Cooper,
problem
can
at
I
all.
jump in?
Yeah, Marcus, please.
So Linda knows I've been a huge advocate of work from home, and I'm saying that it makes you more efficient. But if you know me, I like to do a lot of research, and I found an interesting article on Harvard Business Review, and I'll drop the link after I make a statement. It says the truth about open offices. A study from 2008 to 2012 showed that remote work, undeniably cost effective, tends to inhibit collaboration even through digital channels. People on a team are 80% less likely to communicate with each other with remote work, and it's a huge detriment to projects that needs collaboration. So even though I feel this way, I think if you're in a team environment and you work on projects where it really need multiple people, I think the remote work has some potential downfalls.
So I absolutely agree. And I can speak for my cousin, who's a lawyer in the city, and she says that when she's preparing questions for a deposition with different partners or different associates, this has been hugely detrimental. Usually they'll get in a room, they'll go over the case files, they'll set everything up, and it'll be a day. Now it's taking a week and a half because no one wants to sit on a 9-hour Zoom call. So they're breaking it up into different chunks, and everything is taking way longer than it used to. John, I would love if you can speak, because you have been putting absolutely wonderful things into the chat. I'd specifically like to hear about this Spotify challenge, because that is something that we should absolutely do.
Hi, this is John Hager. I work at Cohen, Kenny, Val, Cynthia, and Cook. I've only been there about a year. I was at Berkshire Health Systems and Berkshire Healthcare Systems for nearly 24 years, various finance and compliance positions. So I'm the firm administrator. So I kind of coordinated getting all the IT out to all these people when COVID hit. So we felt it was important to keep that connection because we're a small firm, 20-something people, and you can't just walk down and chat and have a candy bar with somebody or a coffee. So we did this weekly WebEx, and we put the Spotify, and that's the biggest, I think, thing that draws people in. They got to know the theme, and they are working madly over the next week trying to figure out who would submit what song. And we give prizes out every week for whoever guesses the most. Some weeks it's been terrible. I mean, I think people are intentionally changing their music habits just to throw people off. I know I have. So it's been keeping people engaged and at least connected. And then, we do enough WebExes and Zooms on a work topic. It's nice to just, someone just goes off on a rant that they can't find toilet paper, and then people just chime in. It's a lot more random. It keeps it a little interesting, I guess.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I have a question because I do these like coffee chat. I call them coffee break chats because I didn't know what else to call them, where I try to do something similar and you 15 minutes and I want people to be talking, but I have the unique scenario where none of the people in my group have actually met each other. So there's not an existing camaraderie amongst the group that inspires natural conversation. So how do you get them to want to speak up without having to facilitate?
I think it's just some of the personalities. Some tend to just want to talk, some really don't. I can have my moments. Some days you can't shut me up. I think that's true for a lot of the staff as well. We've only got one person who's literally been hired remotely, and she just goes into her office on the weekends, and she's literally setting her office up. She hasn't been in it till a couple weeks ago. So,
If I can jump in and share too, there's a lot of neat articles and things out there. I've heard companies that do like a t-shirt day, everybody wear your favorite t-shirt or bring your favorite coffee mug. So that gives you something to talk about. Why is that Disney mug your favorite mug or that sort of thing? You can also assign each week that a different person's going to come up with the theme or the activity. So if they're really a sports person, they might pick something around sports, or if they're about the arts, that sort of thing. So you can put it on them too. Don't make it all have to fall on you. And I just want to add one more thing to think about from an inclusive lens, some of these ideas. We can't expect that things like this, that maybe somebody would have to go buy a t-shirt or have to subscribe to Spotify. Please make sure you're checking with people so that they all can feel included, and do they have access to those accounts? Or maybe I can afford Spotify, but I don't know how to use it or to sign up for it, and you have somebody help me with that tool so I can feel included in this as well. Thank you.
We've walked people through the process as well. We had that issue. It's a free account. Someone will walk them through the process. So, right. You want to keep them out of the loop. You can do more harm.
And I agree that for all the hiring managers on here, having interactive things like the Spotify and funny mug is great. Because I took a new job March 2nd, and then 2.5 weeks later, we're at the stay-at-home orders. So even though I have a small team, we have icebreaker questions that I have to generate for every team meeting, and that really helped me learn my colleagues more and my boss, and really establish a good personal relationship. So I really suggest you guys keep doing that, because as an employee, I think that was pretty cool.
What sort of icebreakers are they having you do, Marcus?
Yeah, so I mean, the last icebreaker was, what is a current book, show, or movie that you watch and why? That was one that was pretty cool. Another one was, what is your favorite food? For me, if you know, it's ice cream. I really love King Kong. If you had never been to the Berkshires, I'd definitely say come up here for a big old pint of ice cream for $2.
The amount of times I've seen Marcus walking into our apartment where he's just carrying ice cream that's that tall, and he's just going, guess how much this was? And I go, how much, Marcus? He goes, $3. I'm like, all right, Marcus, welcome to the Berkshires, bud. You're loving it. So it's great. It's great. It is after 1:10, so feel free to unmute yourself. You don't need to talk about the topic anymore if you don't want to. You're more than welcome to bring up whatever you want to talk about. If you'd like other people to chime on in.
Can I ask a question based on Marcus's icebreaker stuff?
I thought you were going to say ice cream. Yes, please.
No, the icebreaker stuff. But so you were joining onto a relatively smaller team, and my organization has about 150 people, and we've worked in various locations, but we have an all-staff teams meeting every other Friday. That's not mandatory. So we usually get about 80 people on them, but how do I make new employees feel more comfortable on that call? Because we don't have the time to do an icebreaker with 80 people.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I can answer this. I've never been a hiring manager and of a team that large, for potentially Linda or someone else on this call can give insight.
Yeah, any advice would be great.
Do you have
Hi,
those new
Kaylee.
employees introduce themselves to?
Yeah, so that's what I did. We had one this morning, and our last one was 2 weeks ago because they're every other Friday. And we had about 5 new employees on the last one. So I did ask them to introduce themselves on there. But it doesn't help them get to know everyone else on the call. So they're seeing, 80 other faces that they don't know and that are talking to them. And I don't know.
What if you did a follow-up? So you have somebody that's a veteran or been there over a year, immediately after the call, do a quick follow-up and say, so what do you have as questions? Who do you want to know more about? What would you like to know about maybe something they said, an acronym they said that you didn't know what it meant? So I mean, doing a quick follow-up and just making 10, 15 minutes. And out of that, by the way, you're going to start getting some data points that will help maybe with some openers for the next session.
Yeah.
You heard Jenna say, well, I really didn't understand. You were using all these code words and realizing, whoa, we've got new people on. We have this strange language. They don't know it yet. Maybe we do acronym of the month, of the week, and we'll say, here's one of our acronyms, and this is what it means.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that.
I also just think a question as simple as what keeps you busy is a great question. Not like, what are your hobbies? Do you play sports? Just what keeps you busy? Besides work, what keeps you busy? And
I just want to go back to Kaylee's question about, how do you make 80 people feel comfortable? So Otis recently did a breaking barriers that was run by our HR leaders and senior leaders at the company. And for the first 5 minutes of everyone joining, and I think there were about 80 people on each call that they did, they had music playing the whole time. So when I joined, all the leaders of the call were like dancing and like singing, and they had cool, fun virtual backgrounds. That's number one. I know that's a little, out there. And then 2, I am the biggest fan of breakout rooms. If you can get technology that allows you to do breakout rooms, having a group of like 6 to 8 people, if you need a moderator, great. If not, you put people in the breakout rooms, you give them a topic to discuss, and it'll naturally generate conversation. Great way for people to get to know each other virtually.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say, Jenna. Put them for the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you can afford. Put them all into a breakout room and let them talk to each other and get caught up. It can help your employees who are already ingrained catch up with each other, and it can help the new employees like get to know people. And you can do them so that they're random, so it's different every time you have a meeting. So they're always meeting new people. We use that with my sorority on our chapter meetings because we've got 70 people on a meeting, and they're not seeing each other in person and catching up.
Absolutely. And all it takes is something as simple as saying like, oh, I went on a bike ride this weekend. And then a new employee goes, oh, wow, hey, like I love biking. Where do you bike? Oh, I bike here with these people. Like you should come next time. And it's just those things that I feel like are really hard over virtual space right now, of just the small talk that we're missing. Because I feel like so many work relationships and so many friendships are born from just the casual mentions of one of your hobbies and then someone going, hey, I love that. Let's talk more about that.
So we had a virtual happy hour with the whole firm, and I don't know if it's because the finance culture, people being too uptight, or just everyone in my firm are hypocrite. Just all the junior guy was just sitting there and sipping their alcohol, and I just watched the partners try to engage, like, and then try to engage conversation. Oh, like Maplewood's going on, and like and somebody answered a quick question and then moved on, and it ended up being all the partners just like having conversation with themselves, and we got so bored, and then we just have like group message, and everybody just, all the junior guys just hop off, and we had our own own separate breakout room, and we ended up having a blast. So, but so that comes to a lesson for a manager that when you are preparing for employee engagement type of events, maybe you should find a better way to engage. I know it's much difficult on virtual, but it just can be just, I don't know, it just can't be as casual as before. You have to be like actively engaged and have follow-up questions, and also try to find a way to make sure everybody collaborates.
I also think you brought up a really good point of a meeting with your higher ups versus a meeting with your peers are two completely different meetings. Because, you know, if I'm in a meeting with my manager and her colleagues, I'm not going to be goofing off in the same way that I would like to get to know my peers with. Like, I'm probably not going to be talking about how I, you know, had a virtual happy hour with my high school friends the other night, and like people were saying ridiculous stuff and doing ridiculous things. I'm probably going to keep it very straight edge, light, professional. I'm going to talk about how I went on a mountain bike ride, and on Saturday I'm playing a golf round that I'm really excited about. So I think they're just different.
Yeah, I agree. Well, but I just feel like when we're in person, it's never this awkward.
I'd agree. I'd agree
yeah.
with that.
I
I think
it's
there's,
different, and you need both. I think you need both of those things. And I think it's really up to the leadership to set the tone, right? Because if your leadership comes into a virtual happy hour with their drink and they're telling you this is my favorite beer and they're just getting involved, like that's a very different vibe than if your leadership comes in and they're just kind of stiff and they're not really getting involved. So it's up to them too. They can help set the type of tone and culture that they're looking for too.
Yeah, which
100%.
I think is one of the outcomes, you know, that got validated here, and that is organizations aren't spending enough time with managers helping them adapt. They're just throwing them in the fire and thinking they're going to figure it out. And this is painful. This is a hard assimilation process. So, I mean, I definitely learned that one today in this call.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Completely agree with that. I've said that to people at Otis, even to HR people. I'm like, people who have a natural ability to lead or have the drive to figure it out can succeed. But if you have someone who needs coaching, there's none. There's no feedback. I mean, it's crazy. And I would love, I ask people all the time, like, please tell me what I did wrong, or please coach me on something. No, people are so unwilling. And I think it comes from a fear of giving honest feedback, or they don't know how to deliver feedback.
And I think I hate that we're tagging this at 120, because I think this is such an important point.
I know.
But feedback right now is huge. It's absolutely huge.
But it's always huge. What's different? It's always huge. What's
There's
different?
There's no opportunity for casual feedback. All feedback that you get comes formally now. And, you know, when I was in the workplace, I would get casual good jobs. I would get casual written ups on like things that I've done for quick edits and feedbacks. And they would sit me down and explain why this is wrong. To have that bandwidth right now and to be able to do that is a very different process.
Okay,
Instead of me being able to, you know, hand a piece of paper and say, is this okay? And have them look at it in a minute and make their markups with their pen, they need to take time to download a file, look through a PowerPoint, you know, make comments, send it back to me in an email and say like, hey, here's this back and forth that we've now created. That's now a 4-hour process because you're getting 270 emails, and it's just going to get lost in the day. Instead of being a 2-minute back and forth, it's now a 6-hour deal.
But I think I'm still finding that I'm getting some informal feedback. I think, I mean, just on this chat, you know, Evan private chatted me when I sent a question and said, great question. Like that's feedback, right? I mean, just initial IMing each other back and forth when you're in a meeting. And I don't know, the first 5 minutes of a phone call, one of the people that I work with said, hey, Krystle, I saw what you sent out. That was really great. Like people just need to start doing.
Yes.
Not everybody is doing that, but there's still opportunities for it.
Yes.
100%.
And Krystle, to that point, maybe it's a matter of like building awareness, because I think some people are aware that they either do it all the time or that they don't, or maybe they're not aware that they don't. And Linda knows I went through a phase in my last role. I worked for someone who I liked as a person, but the most frustrating thing about the year and almost 2 years I worked for him was that I never was told whether I was doing a good job. And like, I thought that I was, because people told me like they liked me as a manager, or, you know, I don't know. It was almost defeating because I never got feedback from him, and he was my direct manager. And we need to make sure that whether you're a manager or peer-to-peer, like anyone across the board, feedback, positive or constructive, is so important.
Yeah.
And I think people are just not comfortable, or I think this could be a whole separate culture chat. I'd love for it to be.
I do too. I mean, the whole piece about feedback in a virtual world. I agree.
Mark, Raymond James.
What's that?
I think Marcus just picked up
is on the call at the moment.
Marcus, can you mute him? We're going to hear his whole private conversation that we shouldn't hear.
I want to make sure we don't hear his conversation.
Well, we got to jump soon.
Well.
We got to jump. We got to jump anyway. Because
are we signing off?
Can I get a phone number to call you and follow up with you?
Can you, Marcus, mute him? Can you mute him? Cooper?
I can. You can.
Oh, I can?
Yeah, if you right click on Marcus, you should be able to mute him.
All right.
Yeah, one thing is just body language. Some people are also liking to give feedback through their body language instead of they're not, like, as you said, people are not comfortable giving direct verbal feedback, especially sometimes it's negative feedback. And when you're in the office, you can notice when somebody's working with you that's frustrated and that takes longer time, and you kind of start to, I don't know if it's a good way, but for me, I start to internalize and what can I do better to avoid this frustration. And just a lot of people are very indirect on giving their thoughts, negative thoughts. So that's just my thought. Yeah.
I think people prefer the subtle approach. You know, it's a lot easier to say, hey, by the way, can you do this next time, rather than, instead of formalizing it, you know, writing up a document, scanning it, sending it back to someone. I think people are comfortable with that.
I agree completely. I think it makes people very uncomfortable to criticize someone in an email. And even if it's, you know, good criticism and saying, I like the work you did, next time this is why you should do it this way, I think it's completely different than sitting someone down and walking someone through a document.
So just wrapping up, by the way, John, welcome, and we're delighted to have you. I think this is your first foray into the Dulye Leadership Experience. I hope you come back.
Put me on the distribution list. So
okay, Nicole's got it. We'd love to, but by all means, if there are topics of interest, please generate it in that poll. Jenna and Krystle, you did great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You need feedback right now, but this was a right on topic. Guys, you did really great.
That was a ploy. Let's tell them how much we need feedback so we get some.
No.
I'm kidding.
I mean, you know, and obviously we'll share the poll results so everybody gets to see the benefit of the feedback of I hope everyone that was on it, but it was such a great topic. We got to keep revisiting this. The whole thing about the manager piece is like, that's a screaming vacuum right now. And, you know, I think companies are wondering, what do I do? How do I do it? What do I do with these managers who I wasn't training them well anyway to deal with people in person? Okay, we can start with that. And now we've jumped into a whole new medium and want them to become subject matter experts there too.
It's all goes back to soft skills training.
I know. And you know what? This is going to become harder than ever for moving generations because they're not getting it.
Yep.
You look, right? I mean, I just look at the kids in elementary school and what the world's becoming.
Yeah.
I feel like middle
Right, thanks,
managers have it the
everyone.
worst.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But yeah, have a wonderful
Bye,
weekend,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.